Hey there, welcome back to another video. Today's recorded discussion is actually between me and a colleague, Evan. Evan runs a company called Networking Roundtable, where he has guests on. In this case, it was me, where we talk all things go to market using AI to grow your business, both increasing your qualified sales pipeline and creating consistent and repeatable sales frameworks so you can scale your business, grow your impact, and hit your goals. Now let's dive into the video.
Hello everyone, welcome to the show. I'd like to introduce our guest, the guy I'm networking with today, Isaac Wood. He's the founder of Lever Growth. Please, Isaac, tell us a little bit about what you do.
What's up, Evan? Thanks for having me. My name is Isaac. I'm the founder of Lever Growth. We've been in business since May of 22, so just over 3 years now. What we're doing is we're working with B2B businesses to help them improve their sales process, specifically through AI and automation. So we're working with our clients, which are in tech, finance, and agency world, to basically just build them a system that allows them to reduce their manual inputs, reduce the amount of time spent doing research so they can spend the maximum amount of time doing their highest leverage activities, which is selling. So high level, we're helping teams build and figure out their sales process and increase their revenue per salesperson.
Fantastic. Thanks, Isaac. And yeah, because I come from the kind of cold outreach world and lead gen world, especially on LinkedIn, I think that there's a lot we can talk about, we can nerd out on. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is the difference between relevance, okay? So when we talk about relevance and personalization, okay? So these are two things that I hear a lot in outreach. You have personalization versus relevance. What is more important in your opinion?
That's a great question. The answer can be nuanced, and in short, it depends. But the high level is based on my experience, and we've booked over 1,000 qualified calls over the last couple of years. We generate even more interested replies. And so what we're doing is we're constantly getting feedback from the market, understanding what people are replying to and what they're not replying to. And what we find over the overarching theme is ultimately your offer is going to be the greatest indicator of any sort of positive reply. So what that means is, does the prospect that you're reaching out to actually want what you're selling? And so that ultimately means and leads me to believe like relevance is going to be the most important. And so what I mean by relevance is it's like you have to sell a service or a product that's solving a pain point that is being faced by your prospect today, right? So if you're selling like a marketing solution to a head of finance, then no matter how personalized you get, no matter how well you've done the research on their background, any sort of events or conferences or organizations that they're involved with or the college that they've been to, those personalizations are very surface level and aren't necessarily going to move the needle if the messaging is completely off. So when you're first trying to figure all of this out, I boil it down, try to bucket folks into greater personas. So, what are the typical common challenges that they're facing, and then write messaging that specifically is solving their typical pain points, testing around those different pain points. And then you figure out, okay, what is actually resonating, what's actually getting responses. And then once you have that figured out, you want to start backing into more personalized touch that's going to give you even more input. But based on what I've seen, a lot of personalization is it's kind of spinning your wheels. It's spending a lot of time doing work that doesn't really matter. And again, if it's not relevant, nothing's going to matter anyway.
I mean, I can absolutely attest to that. And Isaac, I've wasted a lot of time personalizing outreach. And what I found, especially on the LinkedIn outreach side, was exactly what you said, was that people don't care if you've personalized. If you have a solution to their problem, then they're going to respond to you. I just responded to a cold email 2 days ago, and I haven't responded to a cold email in a long time. But this one just piqued my interest. It was speaking to exactly something that I'm working on right now, and just the timing was perfect, so I responded. It was not personalized at all. So
Yeah, exactly, right. Like similar situation for me. Somebody reached out the other day. It was a very brief email. It did not call out anything that, like I said, it didn't call out my college, it didn't call out where I lived, but it was super relevant to me. And so therefore it had my eyebrows kind of go like this. And then I ended up responding to that actual person. What I like to do instead, in the way I start breaking these things down, it all starts from like really truly understanding your customer. So what I mean by that is like a pretty typical way that anybody doing any sort of go-to-market strategy, whether it's outbound or even just positioning and for your website or for your content, is really understanding what does the situation look like for your customer that led them to buy like at that moment. So like what was true about that company. And so contrast this to like a static ideal customer profile, which is a pretty typical way that if you've been in any sort of sales or marketing in the last 100 years, you're definitely understanding ideal customer profiles and defining those as a core tenet of any sort of outreach strategy, which is typically, right, you have your you have your industry, you have your potentially like a sub industry, you have your employee count, you have your location, maybe some technologies. And so those are going to be like static factors or filters that you can find in most of the main data sources like Apollo or ZoomInfo or any number of them, right? And so what that's led is to a lot of generic sort of outreach to a broad-based ideal customer profile where people say, oh, I'm looking for companies, founders and marketing agencies from 11 to 50, based in the United States, right? And so that is the definition of their ICP. And so what that means is, that could be the right person, but a lot of other people are building their list in the exact same way. And so you're doing your outreach, and perhaps you have a really unique value proposition, or you're doing something very, very different, or you're solving a super important pain point that others can't. But in most cases, in a lot of service-based industries, the outcome and what is being done, it's hard to differentiate, especially in an email, right? Especially when it's cold. There's very little time that it takes in order to get their attention. And so going back to the point of like ideal customer situation, you can start to think about what was that type of company and what did they look like when they bought, and then back into that when you're doing your actual list building and your filtering, and use that as the basis for your relevance and personalization. So as an example, I'm a client who we helped reposition their offer. Historically, they were like CPA and bookkeeper. And so that's a highly commoditized service, right? So you're going out to the market and you're saying, hey, we can help your books. And, a lot of people perceive that as, $20, $50 an hour kind of task. They're not trying to sell that low ticket deal, right? They're much more consultative and much more strategic partner. And so we help them refocus their own positioning to more of call it a fractional CFO type offer. And so what led someone to want to buy into a fractional CFO versus like a bookkeeper, right? You want to look at the companies. And so we actually closed a deal with them using this exact strategy. And so basically we found out that those companies were around for 10 plus years. They had at least 10 employees, which, is pretty common, but they didn't have a specific title or criteria. So they didn't have a high level finance person. So like a CFO or somebody in that kind of level. So a controller, somebody like that. And so that was really the basis for the targeting. And that allowed us to write messaging saying like, hey, I saw you don't have X person, or I saw you probably are facing these challenges because you don't have somebody who's full-time running your finance. And so that allows the prospect to be like, oh, this person really knows a lot more about my situation. And it is still personalized, but it's not necessarily that high level personalization of going and saying, oh yeah, like you went to this school, or there's this interesting restaurant around the corner from you. And so we actually saw our reply rates dramatically increase in terms of our interested reply rates. So typically we're looking for, between 10 and 20% interested reply rates as a whole. And this was 30 to 40%, from kind of the initial sort of outreach. So that just shows, you can get multiples better without really using, call it the high level personalization that most folks think about.
What I found was interesting is that you're kind of, when you're doing this personalization targeting, a lot of people, they're just looking for attributes in a business, whereas which are positive, they're using this SaaS tool, so they probably might want to use my SaaS tool as an example, or they're using or they have a CFO, so therefore I can sell them my CFO software. What's interesting about your example is you're kind of you're going in, you're saying, oh, they have all this, but they don't have this person, which is quite interesting. That's something I don't hear very often when people are
yeah. So ultimately you're just, it's a copywriting tactic basically to get somebody to feel like potentially they're missing out on something. And so, when you're thinking about benefits, you're thinking about pains, it's a lot easier to get somebody to take action when they feel like they're missing something versus if they feel like they have it covered already. And so that's really the focus there. And really what I think a lot of people might not even consider when they're writing their messaging is would you even respond to this message in the first place? That's the simplest, easiest way to tell from a high level, is this even going to work, is read it back and actually think through the message. And is this something that if I were in this position, would I actually respond to this message? Because with AI and with a lot of copywriting being automated, and I do use it myself, but I think it misses the plot in some ways, because it does just guess the most likely next word with the models. And so oftentimes it might flow right, but it might not actually make any sense in terms of its logic or its ability to make somebody want to take action. And so the focus really with any sort of copywriting and cold email specifically is just trying to get them to say yes, admitting to having some kind of potential pain or struggling with something. And that's basis of sales, right? You're never going to get somebody to close if they can't admit that they have the problem. So you start at the front end. It's your front end funnel is are you faced with this challenge? I noticed this about you. This is pretty typical. We've helped companies like you solve this challenge with our XYZ system. These are some of the results we get. Is this interesting to you? Something as simple as that. It's a pretty tried and true copywriting framework, but I think a lot of people, especially early on when they're trying to get this stuff to work, think, oh, hey, I've sent out some messages, I personalized it, done some work, and it's not working. What I've found is that unless you have a really dialed in sense for exactly who your ideal customer is, you've looked back at your last 100 sales calls and you've consolidated the top 5 pain points, and you know exactly what's going to get people to convert and close. There's a lot of an iterative process that it goes through in order to actually get a system working. And so usually that's what we spend the first month on is, we want to get meetings and we want to get interested leads, but a lot of it does talk about some of the main KPIs that we'll lean on is actual replies, interested replies, meetings booked, versus just the downstream, which is booked meetings, which is important. But if you haven't done this before, or you're looking to get improvements on your existing process, you kind of have to start a little bit further up the funnel.
Yeah, it's the exact same with leads. It's you need to get leads first before you can then talk about the next stages of the funnel. So it's the same.
Yeah, exactly. It's solving constraints, right? The first thing with any sort of outreach or marketing period is just, what's the volume that you're doing? Are you getting the eyeballs? Are you getting into the right inbox? Are you speaking with the right people? Then you want to understand how they're responding. Are they responding at all? If they are responding, is it good? Is it bad? And oftentimes the bad is you can garner some really good insights from the stuff that's not working, because you might be misinformed and you get a bunch of people telling you, no, this isn't interesting to me, because maybe the market has shifted, or maybe that value proposition has gotten just completely played out, and that's what everyone hears all the time anyway. And so that allows you then to look at the data and actually make decisions on it. Everybody says, oh, we want to make data-driven decisions, but really this allows you to do that. And then it can inform the rest of your marketing, your sales, which I believe is now generally known as like go-to-market strategy in most B2B, at least people on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And just from that, you did mention AI. Where do you see the future of this kind of like personalization, list building? I know you use Clay a lot. So it's kind of like, okay, tell me like what it is now in terms of how you're leveraging technology, and then where you see it going, I suppose would be like.
Yeah, that's a great question, and something I can really talk about for hours because I'm passionate about it. And I think of it as another tool in our toolbox to just make us better and faster. The metaphor or the analogy that I like to use is, think about AI like the development of the steamship, right? So you started with like a sailboat, and there's probably some guys with oars underneath, and you had a whole bunch of people under the deck rowing away, got a bunch of guys running the sails around. You got, however many people to operate that boat, right? Then steam comes along and people say, oh, steam, like that's going to change the world. And it did. All of the jobs are going to be gone. Well, no, not really. The guy, instead of doing the sheets and moving the different lines, they then become like the engineer. So they're like doing the knobs. And so maybe instead of 20 people who are rowing, they have 10 people who are throwing coal in the thing, right? So like that's kind of how I see like AI, where you think about a sales team. Historically, the scaling model has been hire, assume there's going to be a bunch of churn, hit your numbers, just dial or send a bunch of cold emails, and then like that's going to be the way to the unicorn exit. It's not necessarily the case now, and it's just a function of how you need to operate in different channels, and some channels work better and you need than others at different times of the year and different circumstances. And so it just allows a lot more flexible of a model. And so this kind of leads into go-to-market engineering, which was made popular by Clay.com, which is a software that we use and is integrated very deeply into our process. And so what they've done is basically created a spreadsheet on steroids. And so, typically people will, back in the days, if you were building a list, there's a couple ways you do it. You just buy a list on Fiverr or Upwork from some guy in India, and he'd charge you like, 10 cents an entry, and it would probably not be very good at all. Then it's like you have Apollo and you have ZoomInfo. And so you start to do that yourself. But like I mentioned, a lot of the specific filtering is not super intent-based, it's static. And furthermore, a lot of the data in there is actually invalid. So you'll see, if you just pull down data from there, like a 30% or so ballpark number will just be invalid. So if you're sending 100 emails and you're just pulling that data down, 30% of those are going away or not actually sending in the first place. So you're wasting resources. And so now what Clay does is it basically combines, the data source with the data enrichment, of validating information, of doing research, and the third-party VA that you might have hired to manually scrub the list and make sure that everybody's actually real and everybody's actually valid. You have somebody who's sitting on top of there, and just prompting your data set. So what I mean by prompting the data set, that's how you can find out things like, does this company have a CFO? Like we can look up their company's LinkedIn page, and do they actually have this title under their employee numbers, right? So there's so many different applications in the list building process, which I think is super, super important, is a massive leverage point, where I think 80% of the day of an SDR has historically been spent in sales nav, finding the right fits, in whatever LinkedIn tool they're using, or just manually DMing people in LinkedIn, figuring out who's a good fit, and then doing outreach. So you think about most of your day, if 20% of the day is spent doing calling and 80% is doing admin and research tasks that could be automated feasibly by that could be fully automated by the systems that I just shared, then that person is going to get 80% of their day back to do those super high leverage tasks. So instead of half admin or 80% admin, 20% salesperson, you have a 85 to 90% salesperson and 10% admin person, right? And so that shift of their day-to-day, it improves their entire experience, and you get a better result because they're doing selling activities, they're making more money, they're happier, they're staying longer, there's lower churn in terms of the actual internal team. And so you're getting more reps. And so they're waking up every day with a clear plan of, this is exactly who I need to be reaching out to today in terms of the tiers, how quality of an account is it, and who are they, and what are the things that might be resonant to them, versus, okay, who am I reaching out to today? Let's go figure it out. And then by the end of the day, you're burned out and tired, and then you got to make those calls. So you can kind of just flip the whole day on its head and allow the sales rep to get more reps and get better faster and actually do the stuff that they love, versus simply just being an admin person, which is what sales has really turned into, especially with all these different disparate technologies and tech and tools that you can, one thing does this and one thing does another thing, it's just complex and can be, it can be disheartening if you're just a hungry salesperson. You're I want to rip and I want to sell and I want to get on the phones, but you got all this other annoying admin stuff you got to get into. So there's a lot of leverage in AI on that front.
Fantastic. Yeah, so it kind of removes them from these virtual assistant tasks, and allows them to actually focus on the skill set, which is actually providing the most value, which is their ability to sell, to close, to have
Exactly. I feel what most, in speaking with revenue leaders, VPs of sales, where a lot of them go wrong is just thinking about, we can just place sales reps into a broken system and just assume it's going to work out given some sort of volume. But if you have a strategic way of creating consistent volume, consistent inputs, meaning how many people are you reaching out to, how many people do you need to reach out to in order to get a positive reply, how many of those positive replies do you need in order to actually book a meeting. Once you have those kind of numbers on an automated front, you can then also turn your sales reps into, call them inbound agents. So instead of spending all day doing outbound, which they still can very well be doing, but then they'll also have interested leads that they can reply to. So we'll set up systems for our clients where email gets replied to, it's positive, escalated into their shared Slack channel, their CRM, or if they're just using a sheet. And so, hey, sales guy, new lead just replied, this is what they said, they're a good fit based on this research, hit them up. And so if you can hit them up in 5 minutes, they reply to that email, they obviously have some time, or they're feeling that pain, or both. And so you're striking while the iron is hot. And so your conversion rate just dramatically increases, even by, even through an hour or 24 hours later. If you can reply in that first 5 minutes, it's really substantial. I've seen, up to 400 times increases. And you can also apply that too for inbound as well, where a lot of teams, they're getting inbound traffic, they're running ads, they're doing content, and so they're getting form fills. And so a lot of times they have to spend even a little bit of time checking out the lead. Is it good? Is it a spam lead? Is it real? If it's real, then it gets filtered over to the right salesperson, and that sometimes takes hours or a half a day if there's somebody who's responsible for that. And so it's not a lot of work. In some cases it is a lot of work, but the fact of the matter is it still takes time, and time kills all deals, especially when it comes to that early early top of funnel conversion of just getting them into that sales conversation. So there's a lot of really good applications for just creating systems to allow your existing team to just be way better and way faster and just get them the stuff that they need, whether that's creating new content for just the cold emails, for the nurturing, which is where a lot of the selling actually happens, or, you know, for their own outreach, whether that's their own content creation, like LinkedIn, or if they're doing YouTube or what have you. Just, you can use AI for all of that. And we do. How much of your professional trajectory has been influenced by your network?
Okay, so almost everything that I've done professionally has been through my network, and so many of my friends in my social life as well. So it's kind of like when I was thinking about it as I was setting up this podcast, I was thinking about, okay, like of all the money I've made, of all like the professional contacts, you can almost always like trace it back to kind of like a call that you got on with someone, like a networking call, or it could have been a sales call, could have been just like, hey, so-and-so sent you an email. So when you trace it back, it's like, especially since I moved going online, like 6 or 7 years ago, when I started moving to working online, everything, when I look back and I retrace the steps, it's kind of, it's wild to think that like almost every dollar I've made online was because of like having a conversation with someone in the format that we're currently doing right now. So yeah, and Isaac, I know that we actually met each other years ago on like in a different format, and that's why we're having a conversation now as well. So just want to know, like, yeah, from your perspective, when you look back and like networking and having conversations with people, does it look similar to me?
100%. Like, I would say in terms of professional development, huge doors are always opened by just creating connections with folks, whether that's like just sending people DMs, like just trying to strike up conversations, or like just getting in touch with people that, you know, I've known for a really long time, I went to college with, or even grew up with, and just keeping in touch and sharing what you're doing. And that's the benefit of content, is it is kind of like almost networking at scale. And then those who like see it, it resonates, and then they'll reach out to you, or you reach out to them. And ultimately, like, with AI being so important and becoming so like front of mind for everybody, especially with like cost savings and efficiencies and doing things super fast, like there's a lot of fear out there that, oh, AI is going to take all the jobs. And I think in some cases, yeah, it does. But ultimately, business happens because it's humans that have problems, and we're solving those problems. And so typically, we want to be dealing with another person, or at least some warm body, somebody who you trust to help you solve that. And if the end solution is an AI solution, great, that's cool too. But I'm seeing there's a lot of benefit around having kind of like the personalized white glove approach from a person, and then the back end fulfillment is largely driven by some sort of AI function.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm doubling down now, like on human-to-human relationships. As you can see, I'm starting this podcast, and I'm trying to really like position my business around that for exactly the same reason you said. But another thing I will say is I think with the advent of AI, what you talked about, the white glove, it's kind of like, I think human services will become almost like the premium, the less cheap. So it's kind of like, I kind of see it as like plastic in your house. If you go into a house now, the more plastic there is in the house, the less nice the house is, the perceived value, because plastic is cheap and easy to manufacture. Wood isn't, stone isn't. And I kind of feel like it's probably going to be the same with human services going forward. I mean, this is just like, I'm not the first one to think of it, but so think of it as I have a human doing it is a status thing. It's like I don't need. I can afford to pay for a human to do my service. I don't need a cheap AI. What do you think about that?
That's a good point. And I think there's probably a lot of applications where that's true. As we're talking about this, I'm thinking, oh, there's down the line, there's probably just going to be bots for a lot of stuff. But the reality is, it's like humans are still going to deal with other humans. It's all just like in a constant state of evolution and how we interact. Like even with schooling and stuff, right? There was a huge wave of COVID happen and everybody went totally online, and it was pretty cool. But at the same time, there was some issues with development in terms of social skills and how you're actually like absorbing and actually learning. And so just coming and reconnecting with the fact that humans are inherently social creatures. And so we do require some level of actual connection with people. And the reason why we've developed as we have and cities developed is because there's benefits to being geographically close and to be like working hand in hand with other people. So I think like there's always going to be technology that's advancing our ability to do things better, faster, stronger, quicker, and more cheaply. But humans are ideally not going to be obsolete soon.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we're going to be around for a while. Hopefully. Yeah, fingers crossed right there. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Isaac. And I'm definitely gonna have you back on.
For sure, man. Good to chat.